grade 4. I hope you're all doing well. I'm sitting in my cozy reading spot with my faux fur pillow, and today we are going to be reading Chapter 7. The questions for Chapter 7 are in Google Classroom. This chapter is called A Message Full of Holes. It was the printing that sparked Lena's curiosity. It was not handwriting, or if it was the neatest, most regular handwriting she had ever seen. It was more like the letters printed on cans of food or along the sides of pencils. Something other than a hand had written these words, a machine of some kind. This was the writing of the builders, and so this piece of paper must have come from the builders too. Lena gathered up the scraps of paper from the floor and gently pried open Poppy's fists and mouth to extract the crumpled wads. She put all of this into the dented box and carried it to her room. That evening, Granny and the baby were both asleep a little after 8. Lena nearly had an hour to examine her discovery. She took the scraps from the box and spread them out on the table in her bedroom. The paper was thick. At each torn edge was a fringe of tangled fibers. There were many little pieces and one big piece with so many holes that it looked like lace. The chewed bits were beyond saving. They were almost a paste, but Lena spread out the big lacy piece and saw that on one edge of it, which was still intact, a column of numbers. She collected all the dry scraps and puzzled over them for a long time, trying to figure out where they fit into the larger piece. When she had arranged them as well as she could, this is what she had. Lena could make sense of only a few words here and there. Even so, something about this tattered document was exciting. It was not like anything Lena had ever seen. She stared at the very first word at the top of the page, instruct, and then she suddenly knew what it must be. She'd seen it often enough at school. It had to be the beginnings of instructions. Her heart began knocking at her chest like a fist at a door. She had found something. She had found something strange and important. Instructions for something, but for what? And how terrible that Poppy had found it first and ruined it. It occurred to Lena that this might be what her grandmother had been talking about for so long. Perhaps this was the thing that was lost. But of course, not knowing what had been lost, Granny wouldn't have recognized the box when she saw it. She would have tossed it out the closet just carelessly as she tossed everything else. Anyhow, it didn't matter whether this was the thing or not the thing. It was a mystery in itself, whatever it was, and Lena was determined to solve it. The first step was to stick the scraps of paper down. They were so light that a breath could scatter them. She had a little bit of glue left in an old bottle. Painstakingly, she put a dot of glue on each scrap and pressed each one into its place on a precious piece of remaining paper. She put another piece of paper on top of this and set the box down to flatten everything down. Just as she finished, the lights went out. She'd forgotten to keep an eye on the clock on her windowsill. She had to undress and get into bed in the dark. She was too excited to sleep much that night. Her mind whirled around, trying to think what the message she'd found might be. She felt sure it had something to do with saving the city. What if these instructions were for fixing the electricity? Or for making a movable light? That would change everything. When the lights went on in the morning, she had a few minutes before Poppy awakened to work on the puzzle. But there were so many missing words. How could she ever make sense of this jumble? As she put on her red jacket and tied the frayed knots on her shoelaces, she thought about it. If the paper was important, she shouldn't keep it to herself. But who could she tell? Maybe the messenger captain. She would know about a lot of official documents. Captain Fleary, Lena said as she got to work, would you have time to come home with me later today, just for a minute? I found something I'd like to show you. Found what? Said Captain Fleary. Some paper with writing on it. I think it must be important. Captain Fleury raised her skinny eyebrows. What do you mean, important? Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it isn't. But would you like to look at it anyway? So that evening, Captain Fleury came home with Lena and peered at the bits of paper. She bent down and inspected the writing. Fall, she said. Axe? Rem? Aunt? What kind of words are these? I don't know, said Lena. The words are all broken up because Puppy chewed on them. I see, said Captain Fleury. She poked at her paper. This looks like instructions for something, she said. A recipe, I suppose. Small steel pan. That would be what you used to cook in. But who would have such perfect small writing? That's the way they wrote in the old days, said Captain Fleury. It could be a very old recipe. But then why would it have been kept in this beautiful box? She showed the box to Captain Fleury. I think it was locked up in here for some reason. And you wouldn't lock up something unless it was important. But Captain Fleury didn't seem to have heard her. Or, she said, it could be a school's exercise, someone's homework that never got turned in. But have you ever seen a paper like this? Doesn't it look as if it came from someplace else? Not here. Captain Fleury straightened up. A look of puzzlement came over her face. There is nowhere but here, she said. She put her hands on Lena's shoulders. You, my dear, are letting your imagination run with you. Are you overtired, Lena? Are you anxious? I could put you on short days for a while. No, said Lena, I'm fine, I am. But I don't know what to do about... She gestured towards the paper. Never mind, said Captain Fleury. Don't think about it. Throw it away. You're worrying too much. I know, we all are. There's so much to worry about, but we mustn't let it unsettle us. She gave Lena a long look. Her eyes were the color of dishwater. Help is coming, she said. Help? Yes, coming to save us. Who is? Captain Fleury bent down and lowered her voice as if telling a secret. Who built our city, dear? The builders, said Lena. That's right, and the builders will come again and show us the way. They will? Very soon, said Captain Fleury. How do you know? Captain Fleury straightened up again and clapped a hand over her heart. I know it in here, and I have been sent it in a dream. So have all of us, all of the believers. So that's what they believe, Lena thought, and Captain Fleury is one of them. She wondered how the captain could feel so sure about it, just because she'd seen it in a dream. Maybe it was the same for her as for the sparkling city for Lena. She wanted it to be true. The captain's face lit up. I know what you must do, dear. Come to one of the meetings. It would lift your heart. We sing. Oh, said Lena, thank you, but I'm not sure. Maybe sometime. She tried to be polite, but she knew she wouldn't go. She didn't want to stand around waiting for the builders. She had other things to do. Captain Fleury patted her arm. No pressure, dear. If you change your mind, let me know. But take my advice. Forget that little puzzle of yours. Lie down and take a nap. Clears the mind. Her narrow face beamed kindness down at Lena. You take tomorrow off, she said. She raised a hand goodbye and went downstairs. Lena took advantage of her day off to go to the supply depot to see Lizzie Biscoe. Lizzie was quick and smart. She might have a good idea. At the supply depot, crowds of shopkeepers stood in a long, disorderly lines that stretched out the door. They pushed and jostled and snapped impatiently at one another. Lena joined them, but they seemed so frantic that they frightened her a little bit. They must be very sure now that supplies are running out, she thought, and they're determined to get what they can before it's too late. When she got close to the head of the lines, she heard the same conversation several times. Sorry, the clerk would say to the shopkeeper after asking for 10 packets of sewing needles, or a dozen drinking glasses, or 20 packages of light bulbs. There's a severe shortage of that item. You can only have one. Or else the clerk would say, sorry, we're out of that entirely. Forever? Forever. Lena knew that it hadn't always been this way. When Ember was a young city, the storerooms were full. They held everything the citizens could want. So much it seemed that the supplies would never run out. Lena's grandmother had told her that the school children were given a tour of the storerooms as part of their education. They took an elevator from the street level to a long, curving tunnel with doors on both sides. and other tunnels branching off of it. The guide led the tour down the long passages, opening door after door. This area, he would say, is canned goods. Next we come to school supplies, and around this bend we have kitchenware. Next comes carpentry tools. At each door the children crowded against each other to see. Every room has something different, Granny told Lena. Boxes of toothpaste in one room, bottles of cooking oil, bars of soap, bottles of pills. There were 20 rooms just for vitamin pills. One room was stacked with hundreds of cans of fruit. There was something called pineapple. I remember that especially. What was pineapple? Asked Lena. It was yellow and sweet, said Granny with a dreamy look on her face. I had it 4 times before they ran out. But these tours had been discontinued before Lena was born. The storerooms, people said, were no longer a pleasure to look at. Their dusty shelves stood almost empty now. It was rumored that in some rooms nothing was left at all. A child seeing the room where powdered milk had been stored, or the rooms that stored bandages or socks or pins or notebooks, or most of all, the dozens of rooms that had once held thousands of light bulbs, would not feel, as earlier generations had, that the Ember was endlessly rich. Today's children, if they were to tour the storerooms, would feel afraid. Thinking about all of this, Lena waited in the line of people at Lizzie's station. When she got to the front, she leaned forward. When she got to the front, she leaned forward with her elbows on the counter and whispered, "Lizzie, can you meet me after, when you're done work? I'll wait for you outside the door." Lizzie nodded eagerly. At 4 o'clock, Lizzie came trotting out of the office door. Lena said to her, "Will you come home with me for a minute? I want to show you something." "Sure," said Lizzie, and they walked. Lizzie talked. "My wrist is killing me from writing all of this. You have to write the tiniest letters to save paper, so I get a terrible cramp in my wrist and my fingers, and people are so rude. Today they were even worse than ever. I said to some guy, 'You can't have 15 cans of corn, you could only have 3. And he said, 'Don't tell me that. I saw plenty of cans in Pot Street Market just yesterday.' And I said, 'Well, that's why there aren't so many left today.' And he said, 'Don't be smart with me, carrot head.' But what am I supposed to do? I can't make cans of corn out of thin air." They passed through Harkin Square around the gathering hall and down Roving Street, where 3 floodlights were out, making a cave of shadows. "Lizzie," said Lena, "is it true about the light bulbs?" "Is what true? That there aren't many left?" Lizzie shrugged. "I don't know. They hardly ever let us go downstairs into the storeroom. All we see are the reports and carriers turned in. How many forks in room 1146, how many doorknobs in 3291, how many children's shoes in 2249. But when you see the report of the light bulb rooms, what does it say?" "I never get to see that one," said Lizzie. "That one, and a few others like vitamin reports. Only a few people can see." "Who?" "Oh, the mayor, of course, and old Flabface." Lena looked at her questioningly. "You know, Farlow Batten, the head of the storerooms. He is so mean, Lena. You would just hate him. He counts us late if we come in even 2 minutes after 8, and he looks over our shoulder as we're writing, which is awful because he has bad breath, and runs his fingers over what we've written and said, 'This word is illegible. That word is illegible. These words are illegible.' It's his favorite word, illegible." When they came to Lena Street, Lena ducked her head in the door of the yarn shop and said hello to Granny, and then they climbed the stairs to the apartment. Lizzie was talking about how hard it was to stand up all day, and it made her knees ache, how her shoes pinched her feet. She stopped talking long enough to say hello to Eveline Mordeau, who was sitting by the window with Poppy on her lap, and then she began again as Lena led her to her room. "Lena, where were you during the big blackout?" she asked. "I was at home, luckily, but it was scary, wasn't it?" Lena nodded. She didn't want to talk about what had happened that day. "I hate those blackouts," Lizzie went on. "People say that there's going to be more and more of them." She stopped and frowned and started again. "Anyway, nothing bad happened to me. After that, I got up and figured out a whole new way to do my hair." It seemed to Lena that Lizzie was like a clock wound too tightly and running too fast. She always had been this way, but today she was more so than ever. Her gaze skipped from one spot to another, and her fingers twiddled with the edge of her skirt. She looked paler than usual, too. Her freckles stood out like smudges of dirt on her nose. "Lizzie," said Lena, beckoning her, "I want to show you," but Lizzie wasn't listening. "You're so lucky to be a messenger, Lena. Is it fun? I wish I could be one. I would have been so good at it. My job is so boring." Lena looked at her. "Isn't there anything you like about your job?" Lizzie pursed her lips in a tiny smile and looked sideways at Lena. "There's one thing," she said. "What?" "I can't tell you. It's a secret." "Oh," said Lena. "Then you shouldn't have mentioned it at all," she thought. "Maybe I'll tell you one day," said Lizzie. "I don't know." "Well, I like my job," said Lena, "but what I wanted to talk to you about is what I found yesterday. It's this."